This is Rostra, the St. Theodore Guerin Junior Classical League podcast, where we bring the lessons of classical study into the light for the benefit of all. So welcome back to our episodes of Rostra, and we've got with us today Ava Perry. Ava is a sophomore in Latin 2 here at Guerin Catholic High School. And Ava, I know you got a topic that is of interest to everybody. What is your topic?
My topic today is Roman food.
Roman food, and everybody loves to eat, right? Everybody loves. Good grief, we've got the Food Network. We got a whole network dedicated to the preparation of food and so forth. Why did you, however, pick this topic?
Like most people, I love food, and I love cooking specifically. I think it's a very fun thing to do. And I thought it'd be really cool to learn about like what they ate back then, because I never really thought about it. I never thought about like what they ate back then past like meat and bread, and I knew like, oh, probably those things, but not anything past that. And especially with like our modern things we have today to cook and like imports from around the world, I was wondering like what kind of ingredients and things that they used back then.
Yeah, sure, because obviously we got lots of different kinds of foods, and maybe you hear certain basic things about the ancient world, but kind of what about the rest? So I'm curious, what were some foods? I started with foods themselves, and then we'll maybe talk about preparation. But what were some foods that you discovered that the ancient Romans ate that you were surprised, had no idea they would have eaten that?
Well, there were a few things that were like fancier foods from like richer, like there was like big birds like ostriches, and like I'm pretty like just big birds. The only one I can remember at the moment is ostrich. And things, this is not specifically food, it's a drink, but it was like they made raisin wine and different kinds of wines that were like sweeter and had different flavors, which we don't really have today. I was also surprised with garum. Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah.
Fish sauce.
Tell us about garum.
It is it's similar to Asian fish sauce, if you've heard of that, and I have because we've used it in the kitchen at my home before. But it's made with like fish intestines, and it's sun like dried and like fermented and then like made into this paste. And it's used as kind of like a sauce flavoring for food. And I found that really interesting. And I know how that kind of sounds gross, like fish sauce, but I've actually tried like at least modern fish sauce, and it's actually pretty good in dishes. So I'm like, I understand. It sounds actually really good.
And just like olive oils, and you get different qualities of olive oil, and obviously different costs for that. The garum was really big stuff, and it's quite a market for that. So obviously you're talking a Mediterranean culture. There's going to be lots of fish. All right, you just obviously mentioned the fish sauce. And you mentioned some birds. What are some other things in terms of maybe meats that you ran across?
What I ran across is that they mainly ate pork, and not like a lot of beef or anything. They also ate fish, but what I saw is mainly their main meat was pork and sometimes sometimes poultry, like, birds. And often, like, that's, I guess, what I saw for meat. I didn't see too much more for meat.
Well, and you think about it, meat is tough to preserve,
yes.
Right? So we've got the advantage of refrigeration, freezers, unless you're packing the stuff in salt, or some of the things they would do sometimes is, right, or maybe even bury it in snow as a way to preserve it. Yeah, you got to eat it quickly. So meat was difficult.
That was kind of similar with the fruits, because you had to, like, figure out a way to preserve the fruits for all year round eating.
Yeah.
So they had to come up with solutions. I'm sure fruits might be a little easier due to you can preserve them in like by cooking them a bit.
You can cook them in dried fruits
too.
And so forth. Now you mentioned raisin wine, and I've got to tell you, I had never heard of that for the Romans. Certainly grape wine, and they had, just as we do, you think about different types of wine, For us, you hear about a Merlot or a Cabernet or something like this. And the Romans had different types of wines as well, and some that we will talk about in class. But all of those are grape-based wines. I didn't know about the raisin-based wine. You said that was a sweeter?
Yes, it was. It was a sweet and robust wine made of raisins, is what I saw.
Interesting.
And the recipe was believed to originated in
Carthage?
Yeah, it might be Carthage, but it's spelt differently.
Okay.
And it just spread across the Roman Empire. And I thought that was really interesting because I had never heard of like wine made with raisins. And I know like grapes, it's, raisins are just,
right.
Dried grapes. So I was like, I wonder what that tasted like. It sounds really interesting.
So what else besides, so you mentioned, we talked a little bit about meat, you said some fruits and veggies, that sort of thing. Anything else, either in terms of just the raw food itself or particular dishes that you discovered?
There was a few, specifically I saw almost like desserts, which is, technically food. There were pancakes fried with honey and sesame seeds. And then there was also, I saw these, which actually sound really interesting, stuffed dates fried in honey. And I was like, because they used honey a lot because it was like their only sweetener. And that one just sounded pretty good.
Honey was huge. And you think about us, right, sugar, but then also, the high fructose corn syrup that everybody talks about, being bad for you and that sort of thing. But honey was their main thing, which is why Romans really focused a lot on bees and beekeeping. And you'll find depictions of bees in their art. You're going to find writings about bees in their literature and so forth because bees were so important because of the honey.
Yeah, I really didn't know about the bee thing. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen, I'm trying to think of like bees depicted in, Roman history. At least I can't remember. So when I saw, it was super common that they used honey. That's like, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I had a student years ago who did some independent study, and she really just went off just learning about Romans and their beekeeping and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that is fascinating. What would you say is the most surprising or strange, or however you want to think about that, thing that you ran across as you were looking at Roman foods?
This is more of it has foods involved, but this was just really interesting to me because I don't think I've heard of it unless I'm completely forgetting, which is the snack counters, the equivalent for fast food.
Yes.
And I was wondering what kind of, if they had an equivalent to fast food of some sort, and how they served wine, baked cheeses, which I'd never heard of baked cheeses, but that's cool. Lentils, nuts, meats, and how they could heat foods. They built systems so they could heat foods and then give it to customers quickly. And I thought that was really interesting because I was like, I thought fast food was a new thing. And it's like, wow, it's been around.
Not at all. Yeah. In fact, if you go to the ancient city of Pompeii, which was destroyed by Mount Vesuvius.
Oh, I think I saw this.
That's where you're going to find it. Yeah. And so, in fact, you just Google image, Roman fast food, and you'll find it. And it looks like a countertop, right, with all these circles or holes. That's where you would set the pot of stuff, and people could come along and get it. It's like a salad bar. Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating stuff there. So I got to ask this question. Based on what you have encountered, as what you've looked at, do you think you would enjoy ancient Roman food? I mean, and you feel free to say no, or maybe the answer is yes, but a lot of times you learn about stuff and you go, wow, that's really cool, I'd like to try it. You might have read some stuff and said, wow, that sounds disgusting. I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. So what was your impression?
I think, of course, I read about porridge and such, and I'm like, I don't think I'd like those because I'm not a big fan of mushier oats-based things. But otherwise, most of the meat and fruit dishes and vegetables, I'm like, that sounds good because that's just basic stuff we eat today usually. And I'm like, I think that sounds, and some of the more interesting stuff, certain kinds of birds and all that, and the different wines. I'm like, man, I wonder what kind of different flavors they had, and I'd totally try it. because I mean I don't think I've had anything similar to it. So.
Yeah. So in other words, if we get around to building a time machine in class and we get it to work and we go back to ancient Rome, you're going to be set. You don't have to bring any snacks with you. You'll be able
totally. I'd eat there.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Well, before we wrap up this episode, anything else that you found in your research that you think our listeners really should hear?
Only other kind of interesting thing I saw, which isn't a specific, again, food or anything. It was just this little fact that many Romans would have eaten a largely vegetarian diet due to meat being more expensive. And it just, in that, like, when I heard that, I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Because when I think of, like, Roman ages, you know, I think of just, like, you know, these big, tables eating meat. And then I realized, oh, yeah, most of the Rome population was poor and couldn't afford those things. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, well, it really put into, like, perspective what kind of things they ate. And it made me kind of think of it a little differently. So I just thought that was really cool.
bring up a key point there, because you're right. I think a lot of our images are of, the emperors and the lavish dinner party and that kind of thing. And clearly that is not what the average person would have been experiencing. So sounds very good. Well, thank you so much, Ava, for being on the show. We appreciate it. Yeah. And we hope to hear from you again sometime.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Rostra. You may check out all our episodes on Spotify and follow us on social media at GarinJCL. That's at GuerinJCL.